Perfect Sun by That One Guy with That One Ship. Read for you by Munchin on Mochiko. Chapter 2. No Easy Way About It. The last step, the process of changing Sun mentally, was absolutely the most vicious and immoral. It was good, then, that there were some people more than willing to help out with it. Faber may have carried the title of branch manager like it was his firstborn son, but Lusamine could have cared less about that nonsense. Faber was the lead on Type Full project and had since been Lusamine's resident mad scientist. He'd only earned the promotion for never once questioning her and showing some decent ability when he's put his mind to his problems, the kind of ability she could use for covert projects as malicious as Type Full program and the upcoming transformation Sun would experience. Faber's authority would lead the project along with other contacts, people she had no desire to communicate with, but sometimes had to for the greater good, such as Norsec and Kalos. Teams Flare's admin scientist had pioneered a form of mind control, spoken of in rumor and misinformation. The president left it up to Faber to learn the final points. So, of course, when the branch manager told her he'd come up with his own method of forcibly changing Sun's mind, she had serious reservations. "Miss President," he wheezed in that despicable, pathetic nasal whine, "while I respect Team Flare's contribution to this particular field, their technology is prone to malfunction in the application process. I have devised—" "No." Faber's sly expression slipped off his face. "Miss President, your contraptions are historically cumbersome, unnecessarily painful for the subject, and prone to—" Lusamine lowered her voice, threateningly. "Failure. This cannot fail. He will be mine." She had desperately wanted to love the faulty Type Full specimens, wanted to love them like she did any other Pokemon. But it was Faber's incorrect and poor designs that led to the specimens being crippled and requiring containment masks. That could not happen here with Sun. "Please," Faber croaked, "be reasonable. My process will involve complete memory erasure, a very precise operation, but one I am more than capable of performing. It will mean there will be no chance of him recovering any of his memories, and you will be able to have total dominion over him." He waved a hand theatrically as he did so, often when making a point. "No, I will go with what we know, not what you come up with based off of that." Lusamine dismissed him with a shake of the head. "Miss President, humor me. Let me talk you through it." Lusamine sighed. It may be worth at least hearing what he had to say. "Fine," she sighed, scowling. She crossed her legs in her seat. They were discussing Sun's future in her office at the back of the mansion on Paradise. Faber wrung his hands, gleeful again. "I wanted to attempt something, show him his friends, his home, assuming your research into his past is correct, and then find a way to activate the brain and scour all the neural collections that fire. Complete memory erasure." Lusamine glared through half-lidded eyes. "That sounds more than a little risky." "There's an inherent risk, but Team Flare's procedures turn your— Faber was loath to say Sun. Lusamine's obsession with the outcome, which she'd constantly repeated since Sun's capture, disturbed the branch manager, but it allowed him to make these kinds of scientific developments. "Your experiment, it's a little more than a soulless robot." Faber was telling the truth. Team Flare's technology was very archaic to deliver on what Lusamine wanted. "And yours will differ how?" "Sun will still be himself. He will still have quirks and will still remember certain things. By combining my method with Team Flare's, I can go further and plant false memories in his head. He will be genuinely convinced he is your own flesh and blood." Faber had rehearsed that, Lusamine could tell. The gestures, the speedy delivery, the lack of pauses to wheeze or smirk with yellowing teeth. She thought, lifting a pen off her desk and fiddling with it nervously. Faber remained silent. "He has to be perfect." Faber shivered, Whether it was in disgust or simply a brief twitch, Lusamine didn't much approve. "You don't question my intentions, and I won't question your methods," she reminded him. "Of course. I want proof of a concept. Do not perform the procedure. I want to see diagrams, analysis, whatever. Convince me it's safe," she said, without looking at him, focused on the Ather logo on her pen. It slid out of focus, and she saw a double, 2 Ather logos. One was her, one would be Sun. Her eyes focused again, and the 2 became 1. Phoebe's excitement was palpable. "Thank you, Miss President," he croaked, and dashed from the room in an awkward shuffle. The President looked down at her paperwork and dismissed it. She couldn't focus on anything. "Sun," she mumbled to herself. She left the desk in her office, heading to the room where Sun was sleeping. They'd kept him in an induced coma after he'd been brought inside to maintain his weak mental state. Keeping him awake would let him think and come to terms with himself, but they had to keep the fear fresh and strong. To Lusamine, any further pain inflicted on him would hurt her now too, now that he looked as beautiful as her. She understood that his mind needed to be perfect too, and would allow him to suffer to reach that end. Once he was hers, in body and soul, she'd had something as perfect as herself to love and lavish with generous attention. She sat down by the bedside, took his hands, and sat in silence. Sun clung to her tightly in his sleep. Lusamine stared at him. How Lily and Gladian would learn when she'd had them back. What an example of perfection he set for them both. He would be their superior in every imaginable way. His white fingers locked over hers. "Sun, can you hear me?" No response. "We might be trying something different." No response. "I won't let them hurt you." Sun's hand twitched. "Promise." When she received the documents Phoebe had prepared, she was admittedly impressed. Over 40 pages of comprehensive information on the procedure in a little under 8 hours. He'd even included diagrams. Cute. That was an insult to her intelligence, to be sure. She was not entirely convinced, but what Phoebe had put forward was feasible. The branch manager's notes were a little deranged, but so was the task at hand. And as she had predicted, it would hurt Sun. A lot. She knew the ends justified the means. Sun would need to be awake too. It was time to make a decision on the extent of Sun's mental conversion. Phoebe was right. His method would provide the perfect Sun Lusamine wanted. Team's flared method would cause him less suffering. It would be easy to make Sun forget either procedure. How it weighed on the President's conscience was the issue. Sun, before his physical transformation, could have suffered all the pain in the world, and she wouldn't have blinked. Now, however, her narcissism kept her from wanting to shed his blood now that he wore her skin and her eyes peered from his sockets. She thought for another hour, and another, and another. While your McBear method, we're using my method. Don't test me, Phoebe. We're using my method. Yes. You've made the right choice, Miss President, Phoebe cackled. Now, if you'll give me some time to make a prototype? Miss President, we're talking about a device that could target individual synapses in the brain and destroy them. Phoebe shook his head as if he was disappointed in her lack of understanding. I thought you wanted this to be done right. How long will it be, Phoebe? Lusamine hissed. Weeks. You can have 1 week. I have waited too long. Lusamine's temper was flaring quickly up. You can do this fast? Or you can do this right, Miss President, Phoebe said, pronouncing her title with contempt. Lusamine had to pause. He was right, and that just made her angrier. Go. Get out of my sight and get to work on it. I don't want you to keep me posted. Just tell me when it's done. Oh, certainly, Miss Go. Oh, certainly, Miss President, Phoebe repeated. Lusamine snapped and grabbed the closest thing to her. a hardback book on the study of ultraspace, and tossed it as hard as possible at Pheba's head. He gave the most ridiculous shriek and ducked the rudimentary projectile. His overlarge, bug-like glasses fell over his nose and onto the floor. He chuckled nervously as he reached down to retrieve them. Lucimin was already standing over him, and jabbed her heel straight down through one of the lenses, hands on her hips. "Go." You, so materialistic. Lucimin dismissed him with a smirk. "If you insult me like that again, Son may suffer an accident in the operation," Pheba threatened. Lucimin's triumphant expression vanished. Her heel went through the other lens. Pheba was standing again. He seemed to realize his enormous mistake in making the threat. I apologize." Lucimin backhanded him so fast he couldn't even see it. He screeched and collapsed to the ground, where Lucimin grabbed the scruff of his lab coat and pulled him back up, pushing him onto the sheer white wall. "My dear Pheba, just because Gladian and Lillian haven't been around doesn't mean I've forgotten how to play rough." Pheba choked in her grasp. Lucimin raised one leg carefully, took aim, and plunged her heel straight into his ankle. Pheba howled in pain, so Lucimin couldn't determine whether or not there had been a snap. I'm sorry. I didn't mean..." "Walk out on it now." She let him go, and he fell to his knees. "I'm waiting, Pheba." He whimpered and picked himself up, hobbling out of her office. Lucimin glared after him. "Insect," she hissed under her breath. "Disgusting." Tossing the broken glasses away, she wanted to see Son again. She was already worried for his safety. Carefully replacing the book on her desk, she decided to wake him up. Maybe try to talk to him. He was half broken anyway. Dude, I love how hypocritical she is. She's like, "Oh, he has my flesh and blood, so I don't want to hurt him. But if he didn't have that, we can go to town on his pain." Just like, oh my god, this crazy bitch. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this chapter. So thank you for listening.